Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarei. Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us. As we jump back into our study of Likutei Moharan Amud, continuing Torah Chav Zayin, we are on page Lamed Tes in the Standard Edition. This morning's shir is sponsored by zechus Gedalia ben Ilanit and Ilanit bat Miriam, and Yossi Meyer as a zechus for Yosef Ben Rivka and family. Also sponsored by R Yaakov Klein, his parents Rivka Bryndel, Bas Simcha and Ya'akov and Yesha'ihu. The neshama should have an aliyah, and all the names that we mentioned should have a zechus in the merit of the Torah that we are learning together this morning. Thank you very, very much to everybody for the sponsorships. Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we jump back into Torah Chav Zayin, and we've been learning about a progression of concepts that are ultimately angled in a hope to bring the whole entire world la'avdei Shechem echad, to bring the whole world to serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu as one unit. And we use the pasuk Vayava Yaakov Shalom Ir Shechem to cover some of those concepts. That Yaakov is the aspect of Hadras Panim, or really Ha'aras Panim, right, ultimately, but Hadras Panim, which is a deep engagement with our own tradition for the purpose of bringing the whole world to Ha'aras Panim being that collective recognition of the Tzelem Elokim on the part of all human beings. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem, which is a very explicit source in Chazal, doesn't need any twisting or turning. It's, just an explicit source. Every human being is precious. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem. And Chiba Yisera was given to Klal Yisrael on account that we were given Kli Chemda. We were given the Torah, that the Torah is supposed to turn us into Mamlechas Kayanim V'Goy Kadosh. That the Torah is supposed to help us to engage with our particular tradition as in a program for spiritual consciousness and expanded consciousness, that all the mitzvahs are really Kabbalah embodied, as we learned, and they're all mystical secrets, and they're there for the purpose of a person being able to immerse themselves in mind and heart expanding concepts, so that we have the capacity then to do our role on behalf and our mission on behalf of the nations of the world, that we're here, Or Lagayim Nisatich, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed us to be a light upon the nations. So when we have the inyan of Yaakov, which is Hadras Panim, that leads to Aras Panim, that leads to Shalem. Shalem is peace. And then Ir Shechem. Once there's peace, once there's human dignity, once we are doing our role, not simply to point out the ills of society, but to be the healing. Right? Not simply to decry, this, and that, and anti-Semitism and everything. We have to be the healing, not just to fight the anti-Semitism, but to be pro-Semitic values, right? And to go out there and to do whatever we can, in a way of derechah darchin noyam, in a way of compassion and broad-mindedness and nuance, to be a voice of sanity, to be a voice of reason, and to bring the world to the Ir Shechem, right, to Shechem, which is Ir Shechem's, to awaken that inyan of la'avdai Shechem Echad, to bring the whole world to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu as one unit. How do we do that? We move from Hadras Panim to Aras Panim. Hadras Panim is a deep engagement with our particularized culture, with our particularized Torah, which is the aspect of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's the unique portion of Klal Yisrael, and ultimately that leads to the activation of Torah Shebiksav, which is the Bechina of Bar Heitev, that Moshe Rabbeinu was told to translate 70 times to the 70 nations of the world, right? The 70 languages, which are for the purpose of enabling all the nations of the world to draw their energy from the Torah Shebiksav, right? Torah Shebiksav is accessible, has been adopted by the nations of the world and believed in by the two major world religions that account for billions of people on planet Earth, right? And there's energy there, but the energy that they can draw from that is going to be precisely in accordance with the way that we, as Klal Yisrael, are working out our own special, unique mission as the priesthood sect among all of humanity. And that's related to voice as opposed to speech. Speech is the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh, Karin and La, right? It's because Malchus Peh, it's related to Dibur. That's the constricted or particularized expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. And Torah Shebiksav is compared to the voice that gets channeled into the Dibur. This is the aspect of Yaakov and the aspect of David HaMelech. David HaMelech is the aspect of Peh, is Dibur, is Torah Shebal Peh. Yaakov Avinu is the Indian of Torah Shebiksav. And so ultimately, Shufar de Yaakov is Ke'in Shufar de Adam. The beauty of Yaakov is for the purpose of bringing about and manifesting the beauty of Adam, which is the beauty of all of humanity, which is the Tselem Elokim that each and every human being exhibits and each and every human being embodies. And that's the Indian of Kol. It sweetens the voice. But how do we get here? What does the whole system rely on? This is what we were learning yesterday. The whole system relies on Shmiras Habris, which we've been learning in these Torahs is not just a statement, a comment on a person's personal habits, right? Obviously, that's where we work on it, right? And that's the manifestation where a person is or isn't with regard to this avodah. But we've been learning in previous lessons that it's far more than this. It's not a behavioral thing. It's a consciousness, right? You could have a person, let's say, who's struggling with the practical Shmiras Habris, let's say, but on a midos level, they're a lot further along the journey, let's say, than somebody who, for one reason or another, has an easier time in this area, but the midos aren't bris midos, right? Bris means covenant. Bris means a deep bond, right? Bris means the ability to look beyond the surface and to sense not what's shining on the outside, but the true inner beauty, right? And not to objectify like we learned, but to see that everything has a face. Is a concept that we learned earlier on. Shmiras Habris is the aspect of humility, right? Of peace, right? But also humility, where a person is respecting boundaries, and that's the Indian of Shakai. That's the name of the bris. Ani kel Shakai, pray Reve. What Shakai? Sheyesh dai be'elikusa lekula beria. Right, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I give you enough godliness for you. You don't need to look outside of what you already have. It's the ultimate Indian of Ezu Asher HaSameach Bechelkai, right? Because a person feels strain in this area, perhaps a little bit less even generally, or more, generally speaking, than a person feels strain in the area of finances, where a person may or may not be jealous of what the neighbor has, and a person wants to, be pirates together into the parnasa of somebody else, in order to make sure that he has less and we have more. That's not as common. But it is very common for a person to be driving down the street and thinking, that woman that's walking by is prettier than, let's say a person's, what they feel that they have and what they feel that they want, and that's very common, right? It's Zayin Macharim. It's a pasuk we say every morning. We're coded that way. That's not a mistake. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the human being. Angels don't have that issue, right? We have that issue. And therein lies the aspect of Sheish Dai Belikusa Lekulaberia, Misha Amar La'olamai Dai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says there's a boundary in life. Life is mugdar. Life is not hefker. Behemoths are hefker. They can go mating with whoever they want, right? But the whole Indian of living in alignment with the divine will is to live in respect of boundaries. That's extremely important. And so it's a consciousness, you understand? It's not simply where a person happens to be on the spectrum of, this particular behavior. It's the behavior is supposed to be an embodiment of midos. And that's ultimately what we're referring to here. Says the Rebbe, you can only get to hadras panim aras panim, which is haid v'hadar lefanav. The only way you can get to haid ha'aras panim and hadar, hadras lefanav, hadras panim, is kisha oiz v'chedva b'mekaymai. And the Rebbe said oiz and chedva are two aspects of Shmiras Habris. Oiz is the Indian of bayaz, it's kikeish kvurasa, it's an aspect of strength, tukva. And then chedva is the aspect of the matronisa, right? It's the pleasure, it's the delight that's able to bring to the matronisa. Ultimately there it's a reference to the Shechina. And that is the foundation for this whole process. And so in Klal Yisrael work on our Shmiras Habris, and then we work on engaging with Gemara study in the proper way, then, and only then, will we be able to be the shining, the kingdom of priests. But if we do it out of order, and we have a lot of Talmud study, but we have very little focus on Kedusha, it's something's off. So it has to be in the right order. It has to be, the main thing is the main thing. Bris, bris, bris. That's the ultimate. Bris. And then we work on our clarification of the Yudgim Amida, Shatar Nedrashas Bem, Zikna, Hadras Panim, then we get to Aras Panim, then we get to Shalom, and hopefully then we get La'avdei Shchem Echad. Yesterday, toward the end of the year, we were going through different psukim related to Kriyas Yamsuf, some psukim from Az Yashir, Gemara Insight on the topic, which referred to all of these concepts in the context of crossing the Yamsuf, which, like we also mentioned, is apropos for Elul, because Elul is kabbalistically symbolized in the pasuk Hanoisin Bayam Derech. Right, we learned in Torah Vav to the end of Torah Vav, at the end of Torah Vav, that that's where the Arizal finds all the mystical intentions for the month of Elul is from the pasuk Hanoisin Bayam Derech, a clear reference to Kriyas Yamsuf. Right, Elul gives us the capacity to pave a path through what looks like an impassable ocean, right? Harsham Kiyam Nigrash, like Avram Avinu on the way to the Hakedah is encountered by water that rises to his neck. Nachshon and Amminadav can't move, right? Bo Ma'imad Nafesh, right? You can't move, and then all of a sudden Pitom comes Elul, and a path opens up before you. So we had many psukim and mamar chazal over there. Let's just go through them quickly. We said Azi v'zimras ka vayihi li lishua. So we said Azi is the bechina of bris. Zimras is the aspect of kol. Teresh b'ksav vayihi li lishua is the aspect of Vayah Hashem b'tzar lehem. When a person's voice is clarified, then even without dibur, Hakadosh Baruch Hu is already looking down to save the nation. And then we had the Gemara inside Kisha'ali Yisrael Menayam Nasnu Einehem Loimar Shira. Said the Rebbe, Nasnu Einehem. Einehem is an aspect of Seichel because the pasuk says Vatipakachna Eine Shnehem, and Rashi tells us that it's a reference to their Machshava. And so therefore, here you have all the elements. You have bris, right? Aziv Zimras Ka. Zimras is kol, that's clarified, as a result of Nasnu Einehem, as a result of engaging with deep seichel of our particularistic tradition, which is called Torah Sheb'al Peh, and what it means to be a Jew, and following halacha. Zeh Keli Va'anveyu. Again, Zeh is bris, Anvehu is hadras panim, and then we finished with, yesterday we said Roya Zoynes Yabed Hain. Said the Rebbe, if a person doesn't have Shemiras Bris, so then Yabed Hain and the Chazal Darshan Al Tekar Mehaincha Ela Mei Groincha, right? Then there's a problem with our voice, which in this context means our universal projection of Torah values, right? That is extremely limited. So therefore, with this we finished yesterday, and now we'll continue. Yaakov Sheshamar Brisai, Kimai Rashis, Aini Yaakov Avinu, who was renowned for his Shmiras Habris, that Reuven was called Rashis Aini, which is the aspect of the first of his strength, right? The first emission from Yaakov Avinu's body, Zachal Kol. That's why Yaakov Avinu is most connected to the aspect of Kol and enables Yaakov Avinu to be the paradigm for Shufr de Yaakov Ke'in Shufr de Adam, because he has the bris, he has the Kol b'bechinas HaKol Kol Yaakov. Now we continue. U'b'bechinas Kol Zeichel Shalom, says the Rebbe. Once a person has the aspect of Kol, which is Vayava Yaakov, like we just said, because I Kol Yaakov, what comes next in the pasuk? Vayava Yaakov Shalom. Then a person can bring about and manifest in our society shalom, peace, dignity, nuance, the ability for people to handle differing opinions, because we're not staunchly rooted in our own. We're mevakshe emes, right? As a collective. Only people are not mevakshe emes get very upset when they hear something they don't like, right? Because either it's sheker, in which case rejected, or maybe there's something to learn. But why are we getting reactive, right? There's always something to protect, right? And so a person has to reflect on that. And if we had a society where no one was so deeply entrenched in what they already thought, but a person, it was marked by a sense of tachlis haydiya shaloi neidar, a beginner's mind was just widespread, which means, because this is where it ultimately comes from, people were secure enough to be able to change their opinions. You wouldn't believe, because some of the I've only gotten to know me, more recently, but how I've changed. Like I was just mentioning to my wife, over the last 3-4 years, I'm a different person in many respects in terms of the way that I see things, because I want my mind to change. Right, you guys have to check back in with me in like 5 years from now and see if I still, but I want to change. I want to be challenged, and I hope to be my Dala Emes. And yeah, I'm always reading, I'm always learning, I'm always listening to podcasts. I want to know different things. Otherwise, I'll just build a worldview based on the tiny amount that I know, and that's super risky, because could be there's more data out there. I have to. So I'm always, not necessarily that I think. Somebody said, they posted a meme the other day that hit. He said just a few hours more of scrolling and then I'll know. So obviously you'll never know. It's not about knowing, but and that's why I keep on saying it's an estimation of the truth. Nobody's going to have the truth. Nobody's going to be exposed to every data point. But we want to try to be broad. We have to be broad. Otherwise, it being proponent of the value of MS while staying within a ghetto, of thought is not really MS, right? That's just That's that. I don't know what that is, but emes it isn't. Yismach leiv mevakshei Hashem. We want the emes, so go out and get it. You can't be afraid to be exposed to new ideas. Hopefully, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us seichel. We're going to be able to mediate. We're going to be able to see what resonates with my shares shama, what doesn't resonate. And Baruch Hashem, I feel like that process has been a joyous one, sometimes a challenging, difficult, or painful one, but also a very joyous one and a very hopefully successful one. And so, highly recommend it. I'm a big fan of learning. Beginner's mind. So, if we bring that to the whole culture, right, and we model that, and we embody that, so then, I think it could be a phenomenal thing. I think it'd be a phenomenal thing. I think one of the reasons that people were so shaken by what happened with Charlie Kirk recently is because ostensibly this was what he was doing, right? He was going, and setting up tents on college campuses, and he was trying to create space for dialogue because, like the famous clip of him saying, when marriages break down to a point where they stop talking, it's over. What I'm saying? Like, there has to be communication. Communication is crucial. Right now, again, I appreciate the overwhelming alignment with his values and many of our values, not all of them, but many of our values, and he was a big, Oyev Yisrael, defender of Israel, and so on. But at the same time, setting up a tent with the words "prove me wrong" in big bold letters is not exactly what I mean. I'm saying? It's not like, was he ever proven wrong? And if not, that's a problem. I'm saying? That's not, you can't you can't set up a place for true dialogue where you are unbudging and absolutely refuse to be my dilemmas. Now again, it could be I'm it could be that he was. I don't know. I didn't watch that much of Charlie Kirk, but whatever I saw from him, he always won, and not necessarily because he was always right, but because he always won, because he was a radical in his own way. Right now, again, we're not comparing radical to radical, But when I speak about the ideal, that's not what I mean. You know what I'm saying? Again, it's somewhat of the way there, but I'm talking about really the free exchange of ideas, like really the ability to really course correct, and again, even if it's by inflections, like it doesn't have to be like you're wishy-washy. One day you hold this, the next day you hold that, but by inflections, all it means is you become more nuanced. You're still rooted, like we keep on saying, in what you believe, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be radical. So you don't have to have confirmation bias and reject all data that seems to challenge what you say. You can say, oh, the world is a very complicated place. And you have to generalize, so you generalize, but at the same time, it makes you a little bit more of a nuanced, broad-minded, respectful, caring person, right? So even though you might feel that the other person is arguing based on their feelings, and you have the facts, but their feelings is also a fact. So you also have to hold space for that, right? And I think sometimes, especially in the way that he argued, it was, just, we don't believe in empathy, we don't believe in, and that turns people off, So while at the same time, someone who stands strong for what he stands for, and again, zechus levrach, I do believe that he was a blessing to the world. I do believe that. And I don't believe that he deserved, an iota of anything that unfolded, for him, for his family. That's not the point here. I'm just using him as a good example. But ultimately, we can do better. Even beyond that, I think we can do better, and we can argue our points with respect for the people who hold a different viewpoint. And ultimately, in the Indian of going back to Torah Chavei of the Shamir, or what we're learning now of sugyas and going deep. You realize it's not about ideas. It really all is about feelings. Like at the end of the day, it really taka is about feelings, right? Because usually the reason that they hold what they hold is because there are feelings behind there. And if a person knows how to get beyond the exchange of ideas and into the human aspect of this, is not a leftist standing up to the microphone. This is obviously a hurting or confused or misinformed person, but it's not. You understand? It's not a label. It's just go back to the lashon of Rebbe Nachman. Masbirin zeh lazeh ha'emes. Like that's the ultimate goal. So prove me wrong is not masbirin zeh lazeh ha'emes. I've come to learn. Let's say is zeh lazeh ha'emes, or let's talk is zeh lazeh ha'emes. It's not adversarial. It's not supposed to be adversarial. It can't be. The minute it's adversarial, it's not what we're talking about. It needs to really, honestly, genuinely be out of a spirit of humility and the willingness to change your mind. That's so important. It's so important. It's painful to do because it's humbling, and it's like, oh wow. And I look back at things that I posted. I say, I just didn't know. I spoke about something I didn't know about. But that's life. You grow, you develop, you evolve. That's life. I can't hold off on saying anything until I'm 99. It's a process, but I'll share the process and I'll tell you when I think I was wrong. That's how you grow, I think. So that's the inyan of what we're learning now. Kol Yaakov brings us a kol zechus l'shalom. V'bechina shir hashirim asher l'shloima. It says shir hashirim asher l'shloima. What does that mean? Say Chazal. Lamelech shahashalom shaloi. Shir hashirim asher l'shloima. Shir hashirim is the aspect of kol. That's aziv zimraska. So shir is connected to kol, right? B'shamay esri nasam. Now Kodesh Baruch Hu saved them. B'shamay esri nasam. Rebbe Nachman said b'shamay esri nasam is Rosh Hashanah is ba'er. That's ba'er hetev, right? That's the clarification of the voice, which is Torah Shabbat away from Torah Shabbat Peh, or beyond Torah Shabbat Peh for the nations of the world. That leads to Lamelech shahashalom shalai. Because of this, Takef achar kol rina shel shiras hayam, right after Klal Yisrael sing at the Yam, which means that they have a clarification of their voice as a result of, like we learned, the inyan of bris that was revealed at the Yam, atzmas Yosef, right, which is the paradigm of Shmiras HaBris, as well as the inyan of nasnu in Ne'am, so they have the seichel. So right after that experience of the aziv zimras ka, zachul Shabbos shalom. Right after that, they have a glimmer of this ultimate reality, which we imagine, a world that's fixed. The Christians believe that world is now. So it's an amazing, they mamish believe that, there's already peace. Everything is already okay. And they're willing to look away from the state of the world because of a dogmatic belief that Mashiach, Messiah is already come. Gesund und stark. And like this is it. Like this is everything's okay as long as you believe everything's okay. There's historically the amount of violence amongst Christians and different things, and like it's not clear that the crime rate is any lower in Christian society. Okay, but like this is the kind of thing. The world is a broken place. That we're still waiting. The world is not where it's supposed to be yet. The world, what we need, what we want, is the Yom Shekulei Shabbos. That's our image of what they call the kingdom of God, the kingdom come. We believe in a world that's Kulei Shabbos, where, by the way, at a healthy Shabbos table, there's exchange of ideas. That's what we do on Shabbos. Kula masbir and zela ze'emes, hopefully, right? Where we sit and we have conversation. Shabbos is a time for long walks. Shabbos is a time for. Because that's what it will look like on the Yom Shekulei Shabbos. It will just be one big Shabbos table. All humanity sits around. Hopefully it doesn't get heated or anything, and people just enjoy some gefilte fish and chicken soup and say, "Oh, that's interesting," and they dip their challah in it. That's what it looks like in my mind. The whole world just sits together and schmoozes, without because you were invited to my home. So what are we fighting? You know what I'm saying? It's you're my friend. We're sitting and we're schmoozing. I might say some things you don't like. You might say some things I don't like. We don't hate each other. It's okay. Like that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate. That should be the ultimate in a healthy way. That's the ultimate idea. So right after they were given Shabbos Shalom. Shabbos Shalom is a me'ain olam haba. K'maisha kasav vayavoyu marasa. Right. This is the aspect of vayavoyu marasa, and they came to Mara, and what was given at Mara? Shabbos. Shabbos b'Mara nitztava. We're going to learn why in a minute. This is very deep. Shabbos was given at Mara. Okay, so let's pause off that idea for a minute because we're going to get to it in Zayin. But v'zev atan lahem Miriam shiru laHashem. When Miriam, right, which is the bridge in a certain sense between the Zmiris of Klal Yisrael, who's saying Shir by the Yam, and the giving of Shabbos at Mara, because that was the next stop, was Miriam. And so what's the Rosh Hashanah of Atan Lahem Miriam Shiru LaHashem? Miriam announced to the women, sing to Hashem, is Rosh Hashanah Shalom. Shal Yedei Shira Zachul Shalom, showing you that as a result of having achieved Shira, which is the inyan of Kol, then a person is able to reach the aspect of Shalom. Ve'dafka b'Mara kiblu Shabbos Shalom, and the Rebbe says that it's dafka by Mara that Klal Yisrael received Kiblu Shabbos Shalom. Why Mara? So listen to this. Ki kein derech hashalom lehislabish b'Mara. Says the Rebbe, it is the way of Shalom to come through bitterness. Meaning, even after a person has Shemir Sabris, even after a person has, the clarification of what concepts a person is deep, in order for Shalom to manifest, there has to be an aspect of Mara. The Bechina says, the Pasuk in Yeshayahu says, Hine l'shalom b'liwas Chizkiyahu says, Hine l'shalom, the more that I longed for peace, mar li mar, the more bitter it was. But the Rebbe is learning, Hine l'shalom, not like the more bitter it was, but in order to get to Shalom, mar li mar, a person needs to go through bitterness. Just like every refuah, in order for the healing to manifest, there's gonna be bitterness there. Kain HaShalom, says the Rebbe, true peace, true Shalom Bayis, meaning the true bonding of skin that was split open to form a scab, which makes it tougher and makes it less likely, to be split open the next time. Like a true healing comes through rupture, comes through the reinforcing of what is essential that remains residually even after the external seems to fall apart. And then can we dig deeper into this relationship? Can we reveal a point where even though on this level it's not happening, but there's a deeper level? And then we reveal a deeper level of shalom. That sometimes there needs to be mar first. There needs to be a certain bitter embitterment on a certain level. And then as a result of this separation, there's a greater chibur. Which if you think of it ultimately, the whole creation from the standpoint of the understanding of the Ari HaKadosh, and going back to all the Mekubalim, but primarily in the Ari, is that creation, because in the Ari, you learn about the concept of tzimtzum, contraction. The first creative step that God takes is rupture, right? Is a non-creative step, is a concealment, is the creation of space. Then, once there's a creation of space, HaKadosh Baruch Hu re-enters the void in the form of the kaf and comes back in. Shvir Sakelim, right? Later on in the process, right? It's called Tzimtzum Sheni, right? The rupture of the vessels. That's the only way that then the spheres learn how to work in symbiosis. Only once each one thinks it's going to be the leader, and then it doesn't work out that way, and then we inherit a new consciousness, a new paradigm. It's like, there's not going to be a single Mashiach to come save us. We all have to work together. I have a chelik of Mashiach in me. And I, with my chelik of Mashiach, can't save the whole world, because I have to do everything I can to wake up the chelik of Mashiach and everyone else. And everyone else needs to do what they can to use their chelik of Mashiach to wake up the chelik of Mashiach and everyone else. And then, this is a different paradigm. But the only way that we got there is through false Mashiach number 1, false Mashiach number 2, false Mashiach, and then it's like, no, this time it has to be different. We need to move into a whole new paradigm where each of us is implicated. Each of us is part of the journey. But again, these concepts only come because of terrible shvira, darkness, like Chazal say, Bereisha chashucha v'hadar nahira. Darkness comes first, and then light. First 13 years of Yetzer Hara, and then the Yetzer Tov, as the Moharan Amud explains beautifully in Parshas Bereshis. Yeah.
Can you explain the connection with creating space and
So Shalom would seem to say, just keep it homogeneous. There doesn't need to be the reinforcing of boundaries in order for Shalom to be there, because if something is unified, it's unified already. It's yafeh. But the whole inyan of God creating the world was dafka to create definitive boundaries, at least from our perspective, where God ends, kiviyachol, and we begin, which is called our ratzon, right, where I have will, but God has will, but that will might be in conflict. That is where tzimtzum happens, right? Meaning that is what enables me to show up in the world as an apparently autonomous being and interact with things that are not God, right? Even though on a deeper level I understand that ain't the malvadai, but that's not my experience, right? That's called mitzidenu in the nefesh HaChaim. That's called Saiviv Kol Almin from the standpoint of the Balatanya. And that bitterness creates the possibility for a level of unity between the different layer elements, kiviyachal, of godliness, that couldn't have existed without the creation of the world. It's daika here, that from this place we can consciously build a relationship with the Creator, and we can have it in vanila daidi v'daidili. It was only possible with that cataclysmic and traumatic rupture. Both the chalal hapanoim, meaning the creation of the vacant space, as well as shvir sekelim, miyat halavana. These are all different terminologies for similar concepts. Okay? Bitterness and shalom come together.
It's funny that the Christians have this idea of the rupture.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
This is the idea is the rupture, that we all need to create that rupture within to allow.
Right. I wouldn't say we need to create it, but it does get created on its own. Right. Let's go one more minute. Shalom l'rachik v'lakarev amal Hashem. Hashem says shalom l'rachik v'lakarev. Peace can only come about when there's distance. L'rachik and then v'lakarev, and then because only when there's distance can there be true peace. And what's the next word? Amar Hashem urefaseh. Says Hashem, and I will bring healing. Healing is only possible when there's illness. Healing is only possible, right, when there's separation. And that's why shalom it comes through bitterness. There needed to be this long experience of separateness from the nations of the world, of persecution, 2,000 years of exile, and clarifying who they are, clarifying who we are. And then there's Havdalah. And then, like we said, then we can make Kiddush. Or more accurately, Havdalah means to separate, but Havdalah actually is separating for the purpose of them being able to bring our light, Torah Shebal Peh, to activate the light of Torah Shebiksav. Ya'akov leads to Shalom, Shechem leads to bringing the whole world back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Avdei Shechem Echad. We should be Zaycha. Come, it's time for Slichas. Let's go. They're waiting for us. Wishing everybody the most wonderful day. Thank you for listening.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני